Well, welcome back, another week, another video. And the topic today is upside down financial models, and it's been sparked by an experience I had a few days ago. So last week I was involved in 4 strategy workshops, and 3 of them for businesses I hadn't worked with before, but one in particular stood out for me in this context because the business was in need of a new financial model, a new model. Now, this business had already done some projections based off their current position, so they'd taken their historical numbers and projected directly off those. The expectations were to grow the business by about 70% over 3 years, which on the face of it, it was achievable. The sales growth wasn't really the problem. However, the bottom line profit at the end of 3 years was only projected to be around 3% of sales. 3%, which I'm sure you'd agree really isn't up to scratch. So the standard method of budgeting or forecasting is pretty simple. You make your sales projections, multiply that by your gross margin or your GP, allow for overhead costs, and there you have your projected bottom line. Probably a little more in depth than that, but you get the general idea. The problem with this method is that your bottom line profit is simply the result you get once you've finished with the key drivers, the sales, GP, and then overhead costs. And if you don't challenge these drivers, they're all somewhat determined by your view of the past or by your existing financial model. Now, the issue with this particular business was they were trying to build the business off a flawed financial model. So the costs were too high, margin too low, they were overstaffed, they had the wrong product mix. Now, it's often easy to stand back with a fresh set of eyes and see all the things that are wrong with the business. However, when your mindset and your viewpoint is determined by the history of the business as you know it, sometimes it's difficult to see the wood for the trees. And so sometimes you need to turn the financial model onto its head, to start with the end in mind, specifically the bottom line profit. And in this case we said, well, rule of thumb is that you won't get a pass mark unless you're getting double digits on your bottom line. So still not great, we'd like more than 10%, but it's a pass mark. So let's not build your business off a model that shows less than 10% net profit. And at 3%, they're a long way short of that, but at least now the thinking is getting challenged. So rather than just forecasting off historical assumptions, there's now some parameters to work to. So starting with a non-negotiable profit of 10%, bottom line of 10%. When GP is currently at 35%, that means you can afford to spend 25% on overheads, but no more. So then you say, well, what's the overhead projection? Well, it's more than 25%, so then we have to look at cutting overheads, starting with the largest cost, which is almost always HR. So low productivity means some people have to go. But that's not the only levers we have to work with. We've also got sales and GP. So given that staff are reducing, we can't expect to drive sales volume up much further, but we can do something about price. So if you factor in a price rise, that increases the GP and then goes straight to the bottom line. So focus on driving sales of the high margin lines and then refining the product mix. Remove a small part of the business that was actually going backwards. So a few of these things, and by the time we've finished factoring in a bunch of these smaller changes, the bottom line is now in double digits. And it's not through any smoke and mirrors, but by focusing on the finish line first, the bottom line. That way, by making the hypothetical the only non-negotiable part of the forecast, it then gives you the freedom to challenge the other numbers, push and pull the levers, if you like. Because if you're basing your forecasts and projections just off a historical business model, chances are that it will be flawed and needs to be tested. So I'm not advocating a move away from the traditional forecast or budget. It certainly has its place and isn't going anywhere. But by turning it upside down, you may get a fresh perspective that is just what your business needs.